I love my wife. Even now, after everything, I still say it. Not because it makes sense anymore, but because it used to. And maybe that's enough. She was never the type to settle. From the moment I met her, she burned with purpose. She talked about stars like they were old friends and alien languages like puzzles she couldn't wait to solve. Me? I just wanted a quiet life. A family. A real home. And for a while, we had that. When we got married, she promised she'd always come back to Earth, no matter how far she went. Just for a while, she used to say before every mission. And I believed her. Because she meant it then. The first few years were good. We were both trying. She was home between deployments. We made a rule, never more than 4 months apart. She kept that rule. Until she didn't. Her postings got longer. The messages shorter. The kids got older. They started asking why Mom was always a hologram at birthdays. Why she only visited when she had window space. I told them she was saving humanity. They believed me. I think I believed it, too. She left for the diplomatic station orbiting Ivara 10 months ago. Said it was a critical negotiation between the Sorti and the Onari. First contact diplomacy. This could end centuries of conflict. She told me. I nodded. Kissed her. Said we'd be fine. She promised she'd be back before our anniversary. She missed it. Again. That's when I started planning the surprise. I told the kids, both of them tired, both pretending they were fine, we'd go see her. For real. No holograms. No excuses. Just us. A wormhole pass from the Union Hub wasn't cheap, but I didn't care. What mattered was showing up. Showing her we still believed in us. The kids lit up like I hadn't seen in months. Our daughter ran to pack a bag. Our son asked if he could make a drawing for her office. They started whispering about cake, decorations, stupid little party games. They thought she'd cry. I let them think that. Maybe I needed to believe it, too. The night before launch, I sat alone. Looked at our wedding photo. Her smile looked smaller in my memories. I shook that thought away. Told myself I was imagining it. Told myself she was just tired, just under pressure, I told myself a lot of things. The wormhole opened over Mars. We boarded the long-range ferry. I hadn't taken a jump in years. The kids bounced in their seats like it was a vacation. I envied their hope. I stared at the starlines as we slid between sectors. I kept replaying the last message she sent. Things are going well. Might be extended. No. I miss you. No. Love you. Just diplomatic weather. The journey took 3 days, with stops in sectors I couldn't pronounce. We slept in shared bunks. Told stories. The kids asked questions about her, what she was like before they were born. I told them everything. Her laugh. Her obsession with old Terran poetry. The way she used to dance barefoot in our backyard like gravity wasn't real. I didn't tell them about the distance that had crept in. About the nights I ate dinner alone. The times I found her staring at messages that vanished when I walked in. I didn't tell them I was scared. We arrived at Memoria Prime on the 4th morning. Orbiting above a planet full of psionic lifeforms, the station was stunning. Glass, silver, alien gold. The humans here walked like guests, not rulers. I asked an attendant for my wife's suite. He looked surprised. Told me she was in session, but gave directions anyway. We followed a long corridor. The kids whispered about what they'd say. I carried the cake, made in stasis, ready to pop warm and fresh. When we reached the door, I paused. My hand hovered. My heart beat louder than the air processors. Then I rang. She opened it herself. And she looked different. The uniform was sleeker. Her hair shorter. Her eyes colder? No. Just blank. She looked at me. She looked at the kids. And she didn't say a word. No smile. No shock. Just quiet, practiced stillness. Then she asked, "May I help you?" Our daughter ran forward. "Mommy!" she said, arms open. My wife stepped back. A tall Onari delegate appeared behind her. He looked between us. You should have scheduled a visitation. I stepped forward. It's me. Us. We came to surprise you. My wife tilted her head. You are family? I blinked. What do you mean? It's me. David. And your children. Our children. She frowned gently. Politely. Like a stranger trying not to offend. I remember those names. But I don't feel anything. I'm sorry. The Onari stepped in. She's undergone neuroconvergence. To bridge the Onari and Sorti mindsets, she merged cognition templates. The process suppresses bias-forming memory clusters. I stared. You erased her family. She corrected me. I didn't erase anything. I volunteered. It was necessary. Emotional entanglements risked the mission. I couldn't speak. The kids didn't understand. Thank God, they didn't understand. The Onari kept talking. I didn't hear him. I looked at her. Looked for the woman I married. The one who used to hum in the kitchen, who cried the first time she held our son. The one who danced barefoot in the dirt. She was gone. And the woman standing here had chosen to make that happen. She stepped forward. Touched my shoulder like a doctor touches a patient. I appreciate you coming. But I don't remember loving you. That part of me was deprioritized. The cake in my hands began to collapse, still warm. I took the kids and left. And she didn't call after us. Not once. I didn't talk much on the way back to the docking bay. The kids asked questions I couldn't answer. Is Mommy sick? Why did she say she doesn't remember us? Was it a joke? I told them no, and then I stopped talking. I couldn't say the rest. The wormhole shuttle wouldn't depart until morning. We were stuck on Memoria Prime for 12 hours. I got us a private pod and locked the door. The kids cried themselves to sleep. I sat there, staring at the wall, wondering what it meant. How do you grieve someone who's still alive? Who still looks like the person you love, but speaks like a stranger? It wasn't a death. It wasn't a betrayal in the traditional sense. It was worse. It was consented erasure. She chose to forget us. That was the part one couldn't stop circling back to. No one forced her to undergo neuroconvergence. She didn't fight it. She volunteered. For the mission. For the future. For the species. And to do that, she had to sever everything we built together. There had been warning signs. I saw them now, clearer than ever. Her smiles had been stretched. Her calls became professional, efficient. Our anniversary video message was under 40 seconds. At the time, I thought she was tired. Busy. Burdened by negotiations. But no. She was already slipping away from us. Preparing to cut the tether. I remembered when she told me about neuroconvergence, months ago, just in passing. It's a fascinating concept, she'd said. A temporary fusion with the alien psyche to understand intent before language even forms. I had nodded. I didn't ask if she tried herself. Now I wish I had. I opened the message archive and played her old voice clips. Her laugh used to sound like falling water. Now it echoed like a ghost. I watched her tell our daughter a bedtime story, 3 years ago. She wore her old hoodie, hair loose, eyes soft. She ended the story with, "And I love you more than all the stars." That woman was gone. I looked over at my kids, asleep in tangled blankets. They'd dressed themselves that morning in her favorite colors, hoping she'd smile. Hoping she'd scoop them up, cry, say how proud she was. Instead, they were told, gently, diplomatically, that they no longer mattered. I felt the bitterness rise again. Not rage. Not yet. Just an acidic weight sitting under my ribs. I wasn't angry she changed. People change. I was angry she didn't tell us. That she walked into a process she knew might wipe us out of her emotional memory, and said nothing. She let us believe we still had a place. I didn't understand how love could become a liability. How she could view us, me, the children, as distractions to be silenced. How she could reduce her own past to a risk factor. I had always supported her. Held things together on Earth. Cancelled promotions so I could be the stable parent. Stayed up for midnight calls across sectors. Covered for her when the kids cried. Told them she was a hero. Maybe she still was. Just not ours. I spent the rest of the night writing a message I never sent. Not because I wanted her back. But because I needed to release something. You could have told me. I wrote. You could have said you were thinking about doing this. I wouldn't have stopped you. But I would have prepared the kids. I would have prepared myself. Instead, you let us believe we mattered. And then you made us strangers. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I deleted them. By morning, the kids were quiet. No more questions. Just silence. I told them we were going home. They nodded. We passed the same hallways, the same workers who had looked at us curiously the day before. No one said anything. Maybe word had spread. Or maybe we were just another family broken by duty. On the shuttle, I sat between the kids. My son leaned into my side. My daughter stared out the viewport. I could see her blinking fast, pretending not to cry. I didn't cry. I felt dry. Hollow. I told myself to focus on what I had. I had them. I wasn't going to let this ruin them. Whatever damage she did, I'd hold the line. I'd be their constant. I'd be the one who didn't forget. The return trip felt longer. The silence was thicker. The joy that lit our journey and was replaced with a grim stillness. No jokes. No games. Just grief that hadn't found its shape yet. I didn't tell them we were getting divorced. Not yet. Legally, she'd have to initiate it. But emotionally, it was already signed. There was no coming back from this. Even if the neuroconvergence wore off, even if she somehow remembered us, what kind of person does that to their family, and doesn't warn them? Someone who'd already said goodbye long before the actual goodbye. The kids fell asleep again halfway through the jump. I sat awake, staring at nothing, and whispered to myself, "She's not coming back. And that's not my fault." It was the first time I said it out loud. It didn't make it easier. But it made it real. Back on Earth, everything looked the same. But nothing felt the same. The house we built together still had her fingerprints on every corner, pictures on the walls, notes in the kitchen drawers, coffee mugs she left behind. The scent of her still lingered faintly on the couch. I stood there for a while, trying to decide if I should burn it all or preserve it. The kids adjusted faster than I did. Or at least, they acted like they had. They went back to their routines. School. Friends. Screens. They stopped asking about her, but I saw it in the way they glanced at the door when it opened, hoping maybe, somehow, she'd walk through it by accident. She never did. I didn't correct their drawings when they still included her. I let them pretend, even if I couldn't. I started therapy 2 weeks after we got back. Not because I wanted to talk, but because I needed someone to look at me and confirm I wasn't insane for being this angry. The therapist asked what I wanted from the sessions. I told her. Closure. She nodded, like that word was a familiar guest in her office. I didn't tell her the truth, not right away. That part of me still hoped my wife would reach out. That maybe some residual sliver of her old self would trigger a message, a memory, something. I left my comm lines open. Nothing came. What did come was a request for consent to officially classify her neuromerger as permanent, with no legal obligation to her prior domestic life. It was phrased clinically. Cold. Efficient. She must have written it. I signed it the same day. I didn't hesitate. Whatever thread still connected us was dead. And maybe it was time I admitted that. For years, I'd let myself believe love meant patience without limits. That understanding someone's calling meant sacrificing your own needs. I let the distance stretch until I couldn't see her clearly anymore. I let her redefine what family meant until the kids and I became a placeholder for her ambition. That wasn't marriage. That was martyrdom. And I wasn't going to teach my children that's what love looked like. So I started rebuilding. Quietly. Piece by piece. I cleared her closet. Packed everything carefully. Labeled boxes. Didn't smash anything. It wasn't about revenge. It was about making space. I kept one photo, our wedding day. Not because I missed her, but because I wanted to remember the man I used to be when I still believed it would last. I told the kids the truth a week later. Sat them down. Told them their mom wasn't coming back, not the way we remembered her. They cried. I held them. I told them it wasn't their fault. I told them she didn't stop loving them, even if she couldn't feel it now. I said it because they needed to hear it. Even if I wasn't sure it was true. That night I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about how many years I spent orbiting someone else's purpose. How many compromises I made. How I let myself shrink so she could soar. I didn't blame her for chasing her dream. I blamed myself for forgetting I had my own. I started writing again. Just journals at first. Notes to myself. Fragments of feelings I hadn't let surface while I was busy being this strong one. Then stories. Fiction. Characters who faced choices they didn't want to make. I let them speak the things I couldn't say out loud. It helped. More than I expected. Therapy got harder before it got easier. I had to confront the fact that I'd made excuses for her. That I had confused sacrifice with love. That I stayed silent about my hurt for too long because I didn't want to guilt her. I kept telling myself I was being supportive, when in reality, I was erasing my needs to keep her happy. I asked myself the hard questions. If she had loved me the same way, would she have warned me? Would she have chosen differently? And if the answer was no, was that ever love at all? It wasn't about bitterness anymore. It was about truth. Some nights I still missed her. Not the person she became, but the one she used to be. The woman who danced barefoot, who sang off-key in the shower, who used to fall asleep curled into my side. That version of her died the moment she chose a new identity over the one we built together. Grief doesn't always come in death. Sometimes, it arrives in silence. In erasure. In forms you can't bury because they're still walking, still breathing, just not yours anymore. I started telling the kids different stories about love. Not fairy tales. Real stories. About respect. Communication. Boundaries. I wanted them to understand that love doesn't require you to disappear. That no matter how noble someone's dream is, it's not worth the cost of becoming invisible. One day, my daughter asked me if I'd ever love someone again. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say no. Both felt like lies. So I told her the truth. Maybe. But not until I remember how to love myself first. She smiled and said, I think you're doing okay. And somehow, that mattered more than anything else. Healing didn't come all at once. There were bad days. Empty mornings. Nights where her voice echoed in my head. But over time, the pain stopped feeling like a wound and more like a scar. A reminder that I survived. That I chose to stay whole, even when someone else chose to forget. I didn't fly across the galaxy to bring her back. I flew across the galaxy to remember who I was. And now I know. I am not the man she left behind. I am the man who walked away when he realized he deserved more. It took me 3 months to feel normal again, or at least close enough to function. I stopped checking for messages that weren't coming. I stopped making excuses for her in my head. I started answering honestly when people asked how I was doing. Most of them didn't know the real story. They just knew she stayed in space. I let them believe what they wanted. I didn't owe anyone the details. But I owed myself clarity. I spent those months relearning the rhythm of living alone, even though I wasn't technically alone. The kids needed me more than ever, and I refused to let them grow up thinking abandonment was something people just accept. One morning, I caught myself smiling while making breakfast. Not because anything special had happened, but because nothing hurt in that moment. I hadn't realized how rare that feeling had become. peace without permission. I kept writing. What started as private therapy turned into something more structured. I drafted a short piece about loss without death. Then another about love surviving its own ruin. The words came faster. Cleaner. Like they had been waiting all this time. Eventually, I submitted them. Under a pseudonym. Not for attention, just to see if they had value outside my own healing. They were published on a human resilience archive, quietly, without fanfare. I read the comments. Strangers said it made them feel seen. That mattered. One night, while revising a chapter, I received a message. Not from her, but from the Federation's Bioethics Committee. It was a formal update. Her convergence had been classified as successful and irreversible. She had accepted a new identity under the Memoria Unity Accord. Legally, she was no longer considered fully human. Emotionally, I'd already known that. But reading it on a screen made it final. I didn't react. I didn't throw anything. I just sat there and let the truth finish settling. She was gone, not because of an accident or some cosmic disaster, but because she'd stepped willingly into a version of herself where we didn't exist. I wondered if she'd ever feel the weight of that choice. If she'd ever wake up, wherever she now lived, and feel something missing. Or if that part of her had been erased with surgical precision. Either way, I stopped asking questions that couldn't be answered. Some answers don't come, no matter how loudly you wait. Instead, I focused forward. I began doing talks, small, quiet, faceless recordings on identity loss and emotional resilience. I didn't use names. I didn't air dirty history. I spoke about boundaries, the cost of emotional neglect, and the danger of spiritual bypassing in relationships. People started responding. Quiet messages, anonymous replies. That was me too. Or, I thought I was alone. I realized that the grief I carried wasn't unique. It was just rarely spoken aloud. That gave it purpose. The hardest part of healing wasn't the silence. It was realizing how long I'd confused loyalty with worth. How many times I'd mistaken survival for connection. How I let myself feel small because I thought it was noble. It wasn't. Self-respect isn't selfish. I teach that to my children now. I remind them that love must be reciprocal. That it's not their job to hold up someone else's dream if it crushes their own. I watch their eyes light up when they understand. I watch them grow into people who will not beg for affection. My son asked me once why people change. I told him. Because sometimes the person they become isn't meant to stay where they started. He asked if that meant we could change too. I said yes. And that ours would be a change toward ourselves, not away from each other. I kept the wedding ring for a while. Not out of hope. Just inertia. Then one day I woke up, and it was time. I didn't toss it or burn it. I placed it in a memory box. Not as a shrine. As a boundary. This happened. It mattered. It's over. The world moved on. So did I. There were invitations to events, to try dating again. I declined at first. Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't ready to blur the lines between healing and distraction. I told myself I'd open that door only when the past no longer whispered my name every night. Eventually, the whispers faded. They never disappeared, but they lost their power. The echo became background noise. One evening, I did say yes. It wasn't dramatic. Just coffee. Conversation. A person who didn't ask about the past, didn't try to fill a void. Just saw me. And let me see them. We talked about books. Not loss. We laughed. Not because we had to, but because the moment made it easy. I didn't rush anything. I didn't need to. I knew who I was now. I had earned the right to move slow. I realized I wasn't looking for someone to fix me. I had done that already. I was looking for someone who wouldn't ask me to disappear. That night, when I got home, the kids noticed I looked different. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. I was still their dad. Still the man who held them through confusion, through heartbreak, through change. Still the anchor when their other parent chose orbit. I tucked them in, kissed their foreheads, whispered, "I love you more than all the stars." Just like she used to. But this time, they knew I meant it. And I wasn't going anywhere. 4-0. I started living again, not just surviving. It wasn't a dramatic switch, more like a slow calibration back to a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. The version that laughed without guilt, made plans without checking with anyone else, and remembered that he was allowed to want things just for himself. The kids noticed it first. They started coming to me with more questions, more ideas, more trust. I wasn't just the parent who kept the house running, I became the person they confided in. We cooked meals together. I let them make a mess. We stayed up watching old Earth films, the ones their mom used to hate. They giggled through the dumb parts and fell asleep on the couch. I stopped waking them up. Some moments didn't need correcting. In therapy, I talked less about her. Eventually, not at all. My sessions became more about rebuilding, not mourning. I set goals that weren't about proving anything to anyone. I focused on the kind of man I wanted my kids to see every day. Not a victim. Not a shadow of someone else's choices. Someone complete, even after the fracture. I took a job teaching remote communication ethics. It wasn't flashy, but it gave me purpose and let me be present at home. Every lecture reminded me how dangerous unchecked sacrifice can be, how easily it's confused with love when boundaries aren't set. I told my students, respect is louder than declarations. And silence isn't always peace. I never used her name. Not out of hate, but because she wasn't part of this version of my life. She was a chapter, not the story. The kids asked fewer questions about her. I stopped offering details they didn't request. When my daughter once brought up a memory, I listened without trying to reshape it. I didn't need to defend or explain anymore. Let her hold the good. I had carried the weight of the truth so they wouldn't have to. That was enough. I started sleeping better. No dreams. Just rest. Real, honest rest. One day, a message came through, not from her, but from the Memoria Unity Envoy. A diplomatic courtesy, they called it. A recorded statement from her, technically her, but her voice had changed. Flattened. No warmth. Just a declaration. She had fully integrated with her new identity, thanked her previous life for shaping her, and released all emotional bonds from earthbound connections. It wasn't addressed to me directly. It was broadcast across several diplomatic channels. I saw it by accident. Or maybe fate wanted me to see it, just to be sure the door was closed. I watched it once. No emotion. Just a quiet exhale when it ended. That was the final severance. No apologies. No regrets. Just sterilized acknowledgement that we had once been part of her formation. A footnote in her new legend. I deleted it. Then I sat outside with a cup of tea and watched my son draw shapes in the dirt. And for the first time, I felt nothing when I thought of her. No ache. No longing. No what-ifs. I understood then that grief isn't always about loss. Sometimes it's about release. About shedding the version of yourself who waited for answers you'd never get. I was no longer that man. The woman I once loved had evolved into something unrecognizable, and while part of me once believed that made her monstrous, I now saw it differently. She didn't betray me by changing. She betrayed me by not telling me she would. By letting me hold on while she walked away silently. That distinction mattered. Because forgiveness isn't always for the person who left. It's for the person who stayed. It's for the man who kept breathing while she vanished. For the man who tucked his children in and whispered love into their dreams even while his heart shattered. I forgave her, not to absolve her, but to free myself. That night I wrote a letter. Not to send. Just to finish the loop. I told her I hoped she found what she was looking for. That I hoped her new identity gave her peace. And that I no longer needed closure from her, because I had built it myself, brick by brick, in silence, through every lonely night she never thought to call. I signed it with my name. Full name. The one I had forgotten to use for years because I was always, her husband, or the one who stayed behind. I sealed it in the same memory box where her ring now rested. Life kept moving. The kids grew. Their laughter became brighter, freer. I started planning trips, small ones. New experiences. Not in reaction to anything. Not to replace what we lost. But to build what was next. Love didn't return in the form I once knew. It came quietly. In the way my daughter leaned against me during a storm. In the way my son reached for my hand without hesitation. In the stillness of a home where no one was pretending anymore. I learned that rebuilding doesn't mean replicating. It means honoring the ruins while planting something new beside them. I still believe in love. But now I believe in boundaries more. In mutual care. In honesty at every turn. And most importantly, in never sacrificing yourself at the altar of someone else's destiny. Some people are not meant to walk the whole path with you. That doesn't make them villains. But it does mean you owe it to yourself to keep walking. I did. And the road ahead was mine. I didn't expect peace to feel so quiet. Not numb. Just steady. There were no more landmines in my day, no sudden memories that yanked me backward, no silence that felt like punishment. What remained was simple, breath, movement forward. People asked if I would ever go back into space. I told them no. Not because of fear. Because I had nothing left to chase out there. The stars used to mean connection, now they were just beautiful reminders that some distances aren't meant to be crossed. I kept living. The kind of living that's almost invisible to outsiders. Waking up without dread. Making coffee without ghosts. Folding laundry while humming to yourself. It's not cinematic, but it's where the real story is. The kids flourished. My daughter started writing her own stories. My son built model ships, not to escape to other worlds, but to understand this one better. They didn't look for their mother in every corner anymore. They stopped asking if she'd call. That was the hardest part, watching them release someone they'd once waited for with such hope. I didn't interfere. That detachment was theirs to claim. Every now and then, someone from the past would reach out. Old friends. People who had known us as a couple. Most didn't know what to say. Some offered sympathy. Others asked for the story, thinly veiled as concern. I didn't give them what they were looking for. I'd simply say, "She chose another life," and let the silence do the rest. I started mentoring others. People who had been left behind in quieter ways, partners of addicts, survivors of emotional neglect, those who lost someone who never physically died. Their stories were different, but the fracture was the same, loving someone who let go before you did. In those conversations I never preached. I just listened. Asked questions that cut through excuses. Gently reminded them that pain doesn't mean permanence. That love is only sacred when it's mutual. One man asked me how I knew when to let go. I told him, "When you realize you're the only one still reaching." That line stayed with him. He emailed me 6 months later, said he'd finally filed for divorce. Said he'd stopped waiting for a woman who treated him like a placeholder. I didn't feel proud. Just thankful. That maybe my pain had made someone else's a little less lonely. That's how meaning grows. Not in the spotlight. In the echoes. There was a moment, late one night, where I thought about what I'd say if she ever showed up again. Not literally. Just, if some version of her reached back across that unbridgeable gap. I ran through all the words I might use. The anger. The grief. The demand for accountability. But in the end, I realized I wouldn't say much at all. I'd just listen. Then walk away. Closure didn't need a confrontation. I had already done the hard part, letting her memory become quiet. Love didn't die. It evolved. I still felt it, in my children's voices, in my own capacity to forgive without forgetting, in the small joys that no longer had to compete with sorrow. I didn't build walls. I built gates. Boundaries with doors that only opened to those who knocked with care. Eventually, someone did. Not a rescue, not a whirlwind. Just a presence. Consistent. Kind. She never asked about my past unless I offered it. She showed up, not to heal me, but to walk beside me while I healed myself. That mattered more than I can explain. We built something new. Not by erasing what came before, but by honoring it, then setting it down. My children saw it happen in real time. A different kind of love. One that didn't demand, didn't vanish. My daughter once whispered, "She doesn't leave." That was all she needed to know. The past didn't vanish. It folded into the background like a page turned. Still there, still part of the story, but no longer the whole story. I kept the memory box. I never opened it again. It wasn't for revisiting. It was proof that even the deepest wounds can close. Sometimes I sit with my tea, watching the horizon. The stars don't hurt anymore. They just shine. Someone once told me that grief is love with nowhere to go. But I don't believe that anymore. Grief is what remains when love has to become something else. In my case, it became strength. Compassion. Clarity. I don't hate her. I don't miss her. I simply know better now. Love isn't about holding on at all costs. It's about choosing each other every day, and respecting when someone stops choosing you. I chose myself. And I never looked back.